Misinformation detection in social networks.
We are joined by Dr. Suranga Seneviratne, a lecturer in security from the University of Sydney. Dr. Seneviratne is an expert in mobile security and privacy and AI applications in security and privacy. He holds a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of New South Wales and spent 6 years at Dialog Axiata as a telecommunications engineer. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Seneviratne.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. We can hear you fine. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks very much for the introduction, and I'm excited to be here at participating in the ADL AI Summit. So today I'm going to talk a bit about misinformation detection in social networks. What happened? How did we end up in the current situation? What are the methods and techniques we have at hand right now to fight misinformation? And also I'll discuss a bit about going forward, what lies ahead in terms of metaverse and what are the challenges we have to face as we go ahead. All right, so I guess it is morning for everyone who is participating, but let me paint a grim picture for you just before we go ahead. So this is a cartoon that has been shared in social media maybe 2 years ago. I don't know the original artist, but it was very popular. So what it paints is a very grim picture of the human civilization. So the 4 horsemen in the left are coming from the Bible. So they are called as 4 horsemen or the Grim Reapers, who represent things or factors that actually can destroy a civilization or bring down an empire. For example, war, famine, pestilence or epidemics, pandemics or death. So those things are known to bring down civilizations. And what this artist has depicted is that the 5th Grim Reaper, or the horseman, represent misinformation holding a smartphone. In fact, if you think about it, misinformation itself can create a modern apocalypse. It can bring down countries. It can change the political direction of countries as well as the world. So we need to treat it in the same cautiousness or same importance as all the other things. Example, war or famine. We need to give the same importance for misinformation. Now, so these are few examples. Most of the misinformation discussions happen after 2016 US election, as well as Brexit that happened a few months before that. Before that, it was there, but nobody paid serious attention to it. There were discussions, but we didn't realize that how important misinformation is and what kind of impact it can have in our lives. So what happened, for example, the news that's there in the middle of the slide, showing a picture of Donald Trump and Pope Francis. So what happened was that a few months before the US presidential election, some obscure website published an article saying Pope Francis endorsed Donald Trump for his candidacy as the US president. Usually people who know about Pope Francis or know about Vatican, Pope will not take a political stance. So this article was published somewhere in, I think, July 2016. And it was there for some time, but after a while, it became viral. It started being shared in social media, Facebook, Twitter, and others. And closer to the election, its popularity became really, really high. And in Facebook alone, it was shared it was engaged around 1 million times. That is comments, reshares, likes, everything. And only after the election, we realized that it has had a profound impact of the outcome of the election. Now it has been dealt with and taken down. The original website that shared this news or the fake news misinformation, if you read the fine print of that website, it says we are sharing satire, political satire. We are sharing satire news. But when it propagated to mainstream social media, this information was missing. So people truly, some part of people truly believed that in fact, Vatican has endorsed Donald Trump, which is a significant thing if you think about the politics in the US. Similarly, another one is coming from Hillary Clinton. Investigation was going on around that time, and some news articles brought forward the idea that then FBI director actually had some affiliation with Hillary Clinton Foundation, so that whatever the investigations will be done by FBI will be biased. So those are quite a bit old articles. But if you also think about what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, pretty much as they fight in the ground, a significant amount of information warfare and misinformation is happening. Both sides are trying to break the morale of the other party. So quite a number of information about casualties, destructions, all sorts of things. And US midterm elections finished last week, or was it this week? And again, trolls, misinformation, bots, everything was there. And another topic that was dear to this community is the 5G. So you might have heard that there is quite a bit of misinformation spreading around 5G. It's not good for health. It's create different certain health conditions. And last 2-3 years, to surprise for most of us, 5G was linked to the COVID pandemic. I have no idea how that connection was made, but this information is there for about 2 to 3 years now. And people are talking, sharing content, saying 5G is the cause of COVID is 5G. And it's surprising that how many people actually believe these ideas and how many contribute to propagate these ideas. Now, also, when we talk about misinformation and fake news, it's also important to give the facts, because otherwise, whoever is spreading the misinformation will not sort of detect or will not truly believe that there is a problem. So what I'm presenting is a research done after 3 years after the US election in 2016 by Moet and Maxi. And what they did was they analyzed over 170 million tweets. They collected tweets that are related to the US election and have a news website link in the tweet. Did some filtering and ended up with 30 million tweets from 2.2 million users. After that, what they did was they categorized the Twitter handles based on the political biasness, far right, far left, left, center left, all these things, and draw this graph showing who shared what during that time. There were 2 very important findings they found. First is that they found that out of these 30 million tweets, 25%, 1/4 of the tweets were actually containing fake news or misinformation. And also when you look at the graph, this side of the graph on your left represent the right-wing politics. The right-hand side of the graph represents the left-wing politics. And if you superimpose who was more sharing fake news, coincidentally, it was showed in the right side of the political spectrum. That was mostly related to Donald Trump and his supporters. Now, misinformation is nothing new. it has been there for centuries. The example I give here is coming in from 1835. That is one tabloid, The Sun in the US. They wrote a series of articles saying there is life on moon and this is how the life looked like. So they talk about some sort of humanoid bats, bisons, and they carried out this series of articles as news. This is like 1835. And at the end, they suspended the article series saying, oh, our telescope broke down, so we can't further monitor the moon. Even before that, if you go around 1500s, still there was misinformation. For example, there was a maritime war between Spanish and the British, and who won the war, there was quite a number of misinformation happening in Europe. But how did we end up from having those kinds of misinformation, which were not that impactful, if you think about it, on those days? Yes, few people fell for it, but they didn't change any kind of political direction in the country or anything big. But now, misinformation campaigns are well coordinated, well funded in some cases, and also well received by the general public. And we know that misinformation campaigns can change the public opinion, can swing the public opinion, create havoc, and in fact, in some countries, even change the election results. All in all, we have seen misinformation is a great threat to the democracies. And last 2 years alone, we actually saw already what kind of impact it can cause. Assault in the US Capitol, and also quite a number of deaths from COVID because of vaccine and its origin-related misinformation. Right? So the point I'm trying to say is this is quite serious, and we have to take it quite seriously and build technologies to fight misinformation. Now, from these early centuries, a few years ago to now, what actually changed? How misinformation became this much stronger so that it can have a significant impact to our society. So what changed was the way we interact with people. Those days, it was just face-to-face discussions, the telephone came, but that was nowhere in a scale what social networks offer these days. These are the numbers from 2021. So the social networks, Facebook. So I will go through the first ones like Facebook, Instagram. The usual suspect has around 2,000 million, that is 2 billion, over 2 billion customer users. So if you think about the world population, it is about 8 billion. And if you think about the adult population, it will be lower than that. So maybe this is around 50–60% of the world population already in Facebook. And also the other platforms like YouTube, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, WeChat, they were not initially designed as social networks, but we quickly adapted to use them as social networks. It's not, well, for example, WhatsApp is not merely a messenger application. Most of us use it as a social network. All of these social media is significantly contributing to the propagation of misinformation. And the scale is staggering that it's almost impossible for us to tackle it. We are building technologies, but just think about the scale. Right now, we are in a position that someone can post something to 2 billion users in the world. No effort at all. Now, what are the difficulties in fighting misinformation? Can we just, why people fall for it? Can't they simply see that this is misinformation? it's not as simple as one person realizing that this is something, this information is not correct. So multiple reasons. First one is the scale. The social networks are in the scale of billions. Content creation has become cheaper and faster. To create content, you just need a smartphone these days. Create some content, upload it, and it will go rampage in the social network, reaching millions and billions of users. And once something started propagating in social networks, it's quite difficult to contain it, because the content also go across social networks. Some story may start with Facebook, but then it might go to WhatsApp, it might go to Instagram. Containing misinformation in that case requires a coordinated effort from all the social network platforms, may not be necessarily be owned by the same company. And the dynamic nature, that things happen quite fast. As I said earlier, content can move across social networks, and also it's quite easy to change things. One of the common tactics that used by misinformation campaigns is to avoid getting blocked or detected. They will create different variations. I'll talk about this a little bit, but you give the same message, but you change the content. You change the image slightly, that any kind of algorithmic detection will not be able to detect that, okay, this is a misinformation campaign I have seen before. And also the techniques. Designing actual content has evolved so far, and we have methods to create content that are very hard to verify. There is this kind of imbalance between, if someone creates a content and says something, proving that this is not true is a burden. You have to do some fact checking, you have to do something and show that this is not true. But creating something and propagating is pretty easy. And also, we as humans have quite a number of weaknesses that contributes to misinformation propagation. Our decision making is not rational. Our decision making is biased. I'll come to that later. And also there is this idea of homophily, that we actually tend to believe what our friends believe. We put implicit trust on our friends for certain beliefs, that if something comes from those circles, we put more weight onto it. All these biases are exploited by misinformation campaigns. In fact, this is not something new. So if you think about marketing, marketing is about persuasion. Even before misinformation, marketing theory actually used these ideas already. It's just that now we are using it in a completely different domain. The final point I want to raise is that it's not very easy to define one unique, hammer of God type solution for detecting misinformation. Mainly because it requires a multidisciplinary effort. It requires domain and knowledge from journalism, social sciences, natural language processing, computer science, machine learning, complex systems, everything. There is no unified theory of solving the problem. Essentially, that's why it becomes a really challenging problem. Whatever the solutions we have actually barely touch the surface, that we are nowhere near containing misinformation in social networks. Now, so far I just used the term misinformation without actually defining it. So if you want to detect misinformation, we have to know what misinformation is. The problem is there is no correct definition, and there are way too many concepts associated with, and lines, you cross the lines pretty easily without realizing what is truth, what is the truth and what is false. One one well-known definition I will explain, but it's not necessarily, very solid explanation. And you can look at misinformation from two angles. First one is the authenticity, whether this information is true or false. And the next one is what was the intention of the creator of this information? Did the creator mean any harm? So if you look at like that, you can create three definitions: misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Misinformation, actually, it doesn't, the original purpose was not to create any harm. It can be a genuine oversight. It can be a genuine mistake shared on social media, and after that people misrepresented it. The property of misinformation is that it's factually incorrect, but there was no malice or no intention of harm in sharing that information. Whereas disinformation is factually incorrect, and also it is fabricated to create harm. Malinformation is actually true, but it's distributed in a way to create some destruction, increase public unrest. So you give true information with malice so that there will be some event happening. Around those definitions, there are many other definitions, many other subcategories. Propaganda, hate speech, hate attack, bullying, violence, that's harmful content. If you think about the factual part, rumors, foxtrography, fake news, deception, tampering, all sorts of things. There is a whole bunch of kitchen sink here. And also, one thing that's very important, which I will come to this later, is the modality. Traditionally, news used to be text and images. When it came to internet, also it came text and images. But then, now we have multimedia content. We have speech, we have video, and we have a network of people sharing this information. Now, going towards more concrete definitions, we need this because at the end we should know what we are detecting. Otherwise, we can't build technologies to detect misinformation. So different shades of misinformation, you can analyze those definitions with respect to authenticity, that is how correct or how factual the information is, and the intention. Is there any what's the intention? Is it harm? Is it misleading? What's it? And the third piece of information is it news or is it purely fabricated? If you start analyzing along those three aspects, you can start defining these terms. For example, the political satire news, it's not authentic. It might be close to the truth, but it will not be factually correct. The intention is entertainment, and you advertise it as news. A rumor, on the other hand, everything is undefined. It's just a rumor, and we have no clue whether this is authentic. What was the intention? Is this news? We have no idea anything about that. Right. Now, why misinformation detection is a big unsolved problem? There are technical challenges, but also one part of the problem is the human mind. That we have so many biases in our decision-making process, and we have some personality traits that causes us to believe in misinformation, interact with misinformation, engage with them, and spread them. There is also this theory that if someone is telling a lie, if we are talking face to face, we could figure it out to some degree. When you go online, So that skill is encoded in our DNA for millions of years. But how many years we have been in online? Maybe to 10, 20, 30 years. So we as a species, we don't have that skill yet to detect something partially true, something fake online. The biases that are causing these kinds of misinformation spread, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias means we try to take information, or we try to accept information that are in line with our preconceptions. For example, say I have a feeling that one of my friends is not happy with me. This is the preconception. Now I send a text message to the person and the person doesn't reply to me for 2-3 hours. So that I take it as a confirmation that the person is not happy with me. Now, when it comes to fake news or misinformation, this can be leveraged. If I have certain political ideologies, whatever the content that's coming through my way and that is in line with my political ideology, I'm going to accept them. I'm going to engage with them. I'm going to share them. And this creates this effect of receiving more and more similar types of content, sort of create a tunnel vision or a single-mindedness that I share only these types of content. And for a certain, even now, the recommendation algorithms in social networks actually give rise to this behavior. In-group bias is how I value the opinion of a certain group of people and all the others, I consider it hostile. So this creates what is called as echo chambers in social networks. There's closed groups that when you go in, you share news inside that people talk the same things, your confirmation bias increases and increases. Because you interact with a very similar type of community and they share same things. Choice supportive bias is that I make a decision, and when I take the decision, I didn't think. I just made the decision, but then I find supporting evidence. Again, can be leveraged by misinformation campaigns. I did something, I shared something, and I want to show that I was right. So I share more content, creating the viral effect. Cognitive dissonance is the disparity between two ideas. Suppose I have some confirmation bias that I say I am a fan of right-wing politics. But I have the feeling that, okay, some of the political ideologies from the left wing actually make sense to me. Now I am in sort of a dilemma that I am right-wing, but I think that some of the left-wing ideas make sense to me. The human behavior there is to check to resolve this problem immediately. How you are going to resolve this? You start consuming more content from what you like or your preconception. That is the right-wing politics. The privacy effect or consistency is the idea that if we make a decision, we tend to stick to it, or it's like the first impression matters. If you join a group and a couple of people introduce you some sort of idea, a political ideology, you will tend to stick with that. So all these biases in many ways was shown to be used by misinformation campaigns. And the other part of the story is the personal traits. Susceptibility and personality, both of them also plays a role in how vulnerable a person is to misinformation. So think about one example. So if I ask a question like, with the education level, how does the vulnerability of a person falling into misinformation will change? the most naive answer is that when you are more educated, I would expect that this vulnerability to decrease because I know things, I have read a lot, so maybe I will not fall into misinformation. But this is not true. After some education level, actually you are more vulnerable to misinformation than no education level. I have an example later, but those are the ideas that comes under susceptibility. And so what I'm trying to say is that detection of misinformation is not necessarily a technical problem. It has quite a lot of psychological and social aspect associated with it. That's why we can't actually solve it pretty easily. All right. So these are two examples from misinformation. I'll try to relate to those biases we were talking about and see explain why people fall for this. The figure in the left is actually a tweet by Donald Trump during 2016 election. So there are few things that has been done in this figure that a person with some reasonable knowledge background might actually fall for this post. The things that to notice is that, so the title is USA crime statistics. So people become a little bit shocked, anxious when you talk about crime. To amplify that, there is a figure with a person and a gun, and a masked person, right? So already we create the anxiety or terror in human mind. Then you put some numbers. So most of the time when we see numbers, we just try to see what it says and get the face value of it. So what the numbers show is that blacks killed by police is less than blacks killed by white. And also another one is blacks killed by blacks is quite high, 97%. Now, if you just don't think anything else, these numbers seem to make sense. Okay, yeah, there seems to be a problem here. But if you dig more deeper into the statistics, we will realize that actually the black American number is way lower than the white Americans number. And so this statistics by itself doesn't make much sense. But when you give these numbers to a group of people with the confirmation bias towards that police actually are not brutal against African Americans, they can show this as a counter story. And this actually was shared, and there are thousands, I think millions of times in Twitter. The other story is very simple. But I know Queen passed away, but this story was shared before that. So what is interesting with this story is that it's some sort of a deceptive news that most of us know that Queen is quite old, and we wouldn't be surprised if someone says actually Queen passed away. So whoever the person who created this post is leveraging this fact. And if you think it's actually not real BBC, it's some impersonating BBC account where there is an extra I here. So what I'm trying to say is that all of these theories about human mind, we can leverage it in misinformation. Now, the most interesting parts, how we are going to detect these. There are 4 ideas. The first one is the most straightforward thing, the manual fact checking. Second is crowdsourcing. Third is automatic fact checking. And fourth is misinformation detection. Alone, if you go from this side to this side, detection is scalable, cost effective, and provide the fast response. On the other hand, manual fact checking, we hire people to do the fact check. So it's highly accurate, but equally highly expensive. Crowdsourcing is we ask a set of people, for example, we will use something like Amazon Mechanical Turk, or we just ask general population to see what you think about this story. The credibility can vary quite a lot, but it is scalable. And the automatic fact checking, we will come to that later. It's more about how we are going to automate the fact checking process. So based on the scales we have in current social networks, we need faster response. It needs to be cost effective. It needs to be scalable. That's why we need to go towards machine learning AI-based solutions. The first attempt to automate fact checking is called knowledge-based fact checking. The idea is you scrape the internet. Internet has quite a lot of information, and you build knowledge representations from internet. Knowledge representations, you have a specific format. SPO, subject, predicate, object. It says, for example is the Donald Trump, the profession is president. The idea is you scrape the internet, you build this knowledge base. Next time, when something comes up, you go to your knowledge base, query it, and try to figure out whether this information is correct or not. As good as it sounds, it works only for factual information. But we have seen that already, misinformation is targeting emotion. Misinformation is using our biases. So we can't solve this problem only by fact checking. That's why we need some other methods as well. So the second one is style-based misinformation detection. Now we are going into the AI and ML territory. The idea is that misinformation has certain characteristics. They are written in some specific styles so that it appeals to our psyche, and those styles can be detected by machines. For example, if you think about fake news or misinformation text, the percentage of swear words or emotional words is relatively high because you try to arouse some sort of emotion of the reader. And the diversity is quite high. The opinion, subjectivity is quite high. So if you can identify those features, you can generate a machine learning model to detect it. Same thing you can do with the images. People have already done that. I will show one example with how Facebook is doing that later. That you get these features, you train a model. These days, most of us train deep learning models, and you make the prediction whether this article is fake or not. So one thing I want to highlight is that this problem is already multimodal. We have to use text as well as images. Now, so that is the style base. Next, the propagation base misinformation detection. Propagation is how information propagates or how information spreads in a social network. So in Facebook, if you share something, people will like it, reshare it, interact with this. In Twitter, people will comment it, retweet it, like it. Similar in other social networks as well. Then it creates what is called as an information cascade. That there is a way of how people interact with content, and you can draw graphs like that. This you can use to predict whether this is a normal information propagation pattern or whether this is a fake information propagation pattern. That's where the machine learning part comes in. You can define two types of graphs, news cascades or self-defined graphs. I will not go into details. News cascades more focus on who shared what and with what time. It's a spatial temporal graph, but in many settings, it's more simplistic approach. The more advanced approach is the self-defined graphs, where we include more information, who published this, who are the users, what are the comments. We try to include all these in a graph structure and make predictions for each news item. Is this true news or is this fake news? Right. Then the final one is source-based misinformation detection. So, so earlier we checked the news itself, the style of the news. Then we checked how the interaction patterns are. Now we are going to give a credibility rating to the source of the information. The source can be who is creating the news story, or who is publishing the news story, or who is spreading the news story. Again, the idea is to build graphs like this by using the publisher as the nodes and the interactions as the links. If you build graphs like this, you will be able to see clusters. In this particular case, this is a set of US news websites, how they interacted. The link represents a retweet, or like one media company is using the articles from the other media company. And the orange part that is clustered together in the top, it's actually a set of Russian misinformation websites. If you build these graphs, you can detect them to some extent. Now but when you go into practice, these are like all individual methods. Remember earlier I said, this entire problem has multiple aspects. A proper solution should have all these properties together. So this example I took from Facebook. They are publishing how they are fighting with some of the misinformation and their algorithms. So what they're saying here is that there is some sort of polymorphism in misinformation, that you create one piece of misinformation, but then there will be clones that are not identical, but conveys the same information. So the trick is to identify these clones automatically. So what they do is, when someone is posting some information, say an image and text, they search their database and find other pairs of images and text that are close, so that are similar to this original post. And then you use some sort of machine learning and encoder decoder type architecture to measure the similarity score. So if it is similar to a known fake news story, they are going to block it. Some of you might have already seen that. In Facebook, sometimes they say, okay, the recent post of yours, we flag it as misinformation. This technology is evolved. Now, so that's sort of, how we are in terms of detecting misinformation. So next few minutes, I want to discuss a bit about what's the good, what's the bad, and what's going to happen in the future. That's where the metaverse part coming in as well. After 2016, there were many positive things happen in social media that helps the fight of misinformation. First thing is that the social media companies acknowledge that there is a problem, and government oversight make them accountable. And now they can't say, this is our users sharing content, we don't have any responsibility. The social media platform is responsible for what is being shared. There was enormous amount of pressure for them to take action. Also, user awareness is there. People know that there is something like this, so we have to do something about it. Yeah. And also fact checking is happening. The automated methods are already implemented. And now, because of the increased regulatory pressure, Facebook also, especially related to very important events like elections, they actually monitor those countries quite well. But did we solve this problem? No, we are not even close. What are the challenges? Now, after a decade, we have some means of identifying things in Facebook and Twitter. But there is a whole bunch of new social media out there. As a generation, most of us are not even there in these social networks. And we have no clue how the information propagates in these networks, what can be done. I'm talking about social networks like TikTok, WhatsApp, Signal, all these new ones. I think to the first time in history, this year, in the Australian election, advertisement campaigns happened in TikTok. Mainly because the younger generation, they are not in Twitter or Facebook. They are using TikTok To get that audience, you need to advertise in TikTok. Now, misinformation can also spread over TikTok. And we have no clue how to model it. We have no clue how to detect them. It took 10 years for us to figure out some technologies for Facebook and Twitter. We haven't even started thinking about next generation social media campaigns. Then the advances in AI are deep fakes, large language models, LLMs, and more recently, this was released in September this year, stable diffusion. All these things allow us to create content pretty easily. For example, this image in the bottom of this World Trade Center with the American flag, it looks pretty bad, looks fake at the moment, but this technology is going to grow. So this is generated by a stable diffusion model with the prompt 9/11 September after 11/2020 terror attack. So it's quite easy to create these kinds of misinformation and just let it spread. Now the final part is what lies ahead with metaverse. This is the part that gives me goosebumps. Metaverse is going to be probably the third generation of a social network. So you have maybe fourth. So you have MySpace type, the first one, second, Twitter, Facebook, second generation, TikTok, WhatsApp, Signal, third generation, and Metaverse going to be a fourth generation social network. So far, we have built misinformation detection methods for text and images. When we go to Metaverse, we need misinformation detection in audio and video. We are nowhere near on these technologies. Analyzing videos still very difficult. And the way how influencers will work, how content is propagate in metaverse, we have no idea. Also, stronger persuasion. It's quite known that the face-to-face connections, meetings are more effective than reading, writing. And metaverse going to be in between. So in a way, metaverse interactions are going to be more persuasive than Facebook interactions, likes or shares. And that allows the opportunity to create more stronger misinformation campaigns. And how we are going to do content moderation in the metaverse, we haven't even figured it out. So what I'm going to conclude is with that, the fact that misinformation is a serious threat. It can destabilize the human civilization. And when we build technologies, especially these kind of next generation technologies, we have to address this problem from the very beginning. Otherwise, we are going to end up with the same situation as we ended up with something like Twitter and Facebook. I think that's pretty much it from me. If there are any questions, I'm quite happy to take.
Question for you. So we've all been watching Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter with bated breath. What impact do you think that will have on misinformation?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. I have been following this quite a lot. So I think the initial objective was to get the accounts verified, assuming that will help with reducing misinformation. But what turned out in last few days is that getting that right was not that easy. But if we follow what Musk was telling before the acquisition, that we are going to verify Twitter users with some form of identity, I think that will help with misinformation. This is true to some, my analogy would be WhatsApp. In some countries, you need to provide identity documents to get the phone number. And the WhatsApp accounts are associated with the phone number. In those countries, the amount of misinformation travels to WhatsApp is low. But if you can buy a SIM card quite easily, then yes, that's a problem. So in the long run, I think Twitter probably is going to solve this problem with, not solve, but to some extent mitigate this problem with the verified accounts. But something interesting to see, wait and see.
you so much, Dr. Seneviratne, for that very eye-opening presentation.